Hey everyone, back tuning into Solar Sunday. We're going to have a look at Solar Cycle 24 today, see how it's progressing. And then we'll go on and have a look at some other Solar Cycles 5 and 6 with Dalton minimum. We're going to go even further back in time than that and have a look at the Maunder minimum and the centuries that preceded the Maunder minimum. So we're going to cover several hundred years in this video. I hope you enjoy it and find it interesting. Haven't done a solar update since April, so we're certainly due for one. Now, before I get on with the Solar Sunday update, just want to mention the ads. There's a video ad on all my pages at GazWebVids.com. If you've got to hit play on the video ad, you'll be supporting GazWebVids.com. Thanks so much for doing that. Essentially, it pays the website, allows me to see and talk to you via the website. So if you could get involved, you could hit play on the video ad. You'll be helping to support GazWebVids. Thanks so much for doing that. So before we go on with anything else, we better have a look at what the sun is doing right now. This is the solar disk on our side of the disk today when I'm doing the video on Friday evening. Solar activity at the website solarham.net is officially designated as low. We've got low solar activity at the moment. Have got some sunspots around. You would expect that with just coming off the back of solar maximum earlier in the year, but not a great deal happening really. Very low sort of solar activity, sunspot activity just at the moment. This is the graph showing how Solar Cycle 24 is doing in comparison to Solar Cycle 23, the last solar cycle. Remember, the solar cycles are going from a maximum to a minimum to a maximum again at a roughly 11-year interval. This was sent to me by the lovely James Ackrill. Sent me this graph showing how things are progressing with Solar Cycle 24 compared to Solar Cycle 23. This is where we currently are right now, just there. We did get the second peak in the solar maximum just here. Had the first one in 2011, of course, in 2011. Had another one at the start of 2014. Unusually, I've explained this in other Solar Cycle updates, unusually the second peak of Solar Cycle 24 was bigger than the first peak. Normally, and we'll have a look at Solar Cycle 23 just here, normally the first peak in Solar Cycle 23, it happened around the year 2000, start of the year 2000. Normally the first peak is bigger than the second peak. We did get a second peak in Solar Cycle 23, happened around the start of 2002. But it was less of a peak than the first peak, and that's generally what you see through the solar cycle. So this one, Solar Cycle 24, has been very unusual in that the second peak was not much in it, but ever so slightly bigger than the first peak that occurred in 2011. Anyway, we're moving down now, we're moving back, and I think that's probably as much solar activity as we're going to get this solar cycle through Solar Cycle 24. We will get further peaks going up woods like that, and then down, and then up, and down, and so on, until we eventually crash down in towards solar minimum. But I don't think we'll get back to where we was. I don't think we'll get back to where it was at the start of 2014. So I think we've gone past solar maximum now, and very gradually, it won't be a linear process. It won't happen with every month showing a decline, but very gradually I think we will slip down now in towards the solar minimum of Solar Cycle 24. And then of course when we reach the minimum, we'll go on into Solar Cycle 25. We'll have a look at that in a moment. As you can see, very much less of the solar cycle this cycle compared to Solar Cycle 23, and that solar cycle was less of a cycle compared to Solar Cycle 22. So we're very gradually through these solar cycles seeing a reduction in activity. This is from NASA. This is the same sort of graph that you're just looking at, only slightly different. This is how we was in June with NASA. Was just there in terms of the solar activities. So it was coming off solar maximum through June. We went down to just there. As we go through to the latest update, which is showing us where we are up to July, we can see that yes, we've gone down further. So that's where we was in June, with that white line just there. Going through to July, we find that we do go down further through July. We move down virtually towards this line just here, which is showing us the smooth sort of data in terms of the maximum, and then going down in towards the minimum. So definitely signs that we are going downwards, although we've got ever such a very slight tick up right at the very end of July. But I say, I don't think we're going to go back up to where we was at the start of 2014. And we expect these little increases up and down, though overall through the months we will gradually trend downwards, as this smooth line shows that we will gradually move down in towards the solar minimum, which will occur sometime around here, 2019 or 2020. I mean, quite where we go beyond that as we move through into the next solar cycle. Solar cycle 25 is going to be very interesting. We've only had one prediction for solar cycle 25 so far. This was issued a few years ago, and well, we can see about the predictions for a very, very weak solar cycle indeed. I don't think it'll be as bad as that. The prediction for solar cycle 24 was just here. Actually, I think we're a little bit above that, somewhere around there. So I would anticipate that this next solar cycle 25, will see a little bit more of an increase in this. Actually, we should start getting a few more forecasts coming through for solar cycle 25 within the next year or two. Usually the forecasts appear once you've gone past solar maximum. They begin to start thinking about the next solar cycle. I think we have gone past solar maximum now, so I'd anticipate in the next couple of years, 2015, 2016, we should start to see more predictions coming through for what may happen in terms of the highly anticipated and highly speculated about solar cycle 25. Now let's have a look at solar cycle 5 and solar cycle 6. This is the Dalton minimum, and they're over here taking us from around 1798, something like that, at the start of solar cycle 5, and going through to around 1810, which is the start of solar cycle 6, and that takes us through to around 1821, 1822. So the first sort of 2 or 3 decades of the 1800s is Dalton minimum, and they're these years just here. We are running very closely to those cycles, or certainly solar cycle 24 is running very closely to solar cycle 5. It is a little bit more of a cycle, of course. There's more activity with solar cycle 24 than it is the case with solar cycle 5. That could be simply down to recording, really. Some of the sunspots that wouldn't have been spotted back in the early part of the 1800s may be recorded as sunspots now. So you have to bear in mind that the technology wasn't as good back then for seeing the sunspots. So once you take that into account, we're probably running quite closely solar cycle 24 to solar cycle 5. This chart is quite interesting. This graph is quite interesting. It's the layman's count comparison showing how solar cycle 24 and solar cycle 5 are aligning. The pink line here on the graph is solar cycle 5. The blue line is solar cycle 24, and you can see that we are running pretty closely, really. Not an exact replica, I have to say, not an exact replica, but nevertheless we get this increase occurring around the same time with both solar cycles moving up towards the solar maximum, and it's very much up and down with both of these cycles, solar cycle 5, solar cycle 24, with peaks and troughs really going on through these two weak cycles. These are weak cycles once you look at the overall sort of 24 solar cycles. These are on the weak side of those cycles, and we very much see peaks and troughs. The peaks and troughs aren't occurring at exactly the same time, so that with solar cycle 25 4, for instance, we get a peak just here. We don't really get that with Solar Cycle 5. Solar Cycle 5 has a peak just here and just here, where Solar Cycle 24 is trending down a little bit actually through those periods. So it's not an exact match, but I think once you look at the bigger picture, and if you assume those peaks and troughs are going to be occurring at slightly different intervals, because we are talking about 2 different cycles, overall though, I think the cycles are aligning quite nicely, and here we are right at the very far as we can go so far with Solar Cycle 24, which is this little tick up, but just the peak that occurs at the start of 2014 in terms of Solar Cycle 24. There's the first peak, by the way, that occurs at the end of 2011. Here we are to the start of 2014 with the second peak, ever so slightly stronger than the first peak. Then we've ticked down, or we've gone downwards, back more or less to where we was through the years of, say, 2012, 2013. We're more or less back into that sort of realm now, and then we tick up a little bit again right at the very end of July, as we saw on the graph that we was just looking at, and that's what happens with Solar Cycle 5. And actually with Solar Cycle 5 we go up to the strongest point of the cycle actually, which is just there, that pink peak occurring just there. And we may see something similar happening with this cycle. We may get a third peak. Personally, I would be surprised if we get back to there. But I think we may tick up a little bit through the the final months of 2014, maybe start of 2015, because we are aligning quite nicely these two cycles. So I would anticipate we'll probably get another bit of a peak, but probably not getting back to where it was at the start of 2014. And then we will, or we should, go off in towards the solar minimum. But I think there is very good evidence there. It is quite clear, although it's not a linear thing, it's not exactly identical. You couldn't lay the two lines over one another and have a perfect sort of match, but nevertheless I think overall very similar the way we're aligning Solar Cycles 5 and Solar Cycles 24. So that sort of increases the possibility that as we get through to Solar Cycle 25, the next solar cycle, we may find things going even further down, because as we have with Solar Cycle 5 and Solar Cycle 6, they're both two very weak cycles back to back. We may find that Solar Cycle 24, Solar Cycle 25 are both very weak cycles again. Then if that happens, we are running quite closely to the Dalton minimum, I think. But as I say, this is the only sort of prediction we've had this just here for Solar Cycle 25. It's the only prediction we've had so far for Solar Cycle 25. So I would anticipate we'll be above this. I don't think it'll be quite as traumatic as this. It may be. I'm not an expert really on solar cycles, so it may be that this is right. But my anticipation would be that will be somewhat upwards, but probably underneath Solar Cycle 24. Now let's have a look at how the Dalton minimum compares to the Maunder minimum. So this is a very interesting chart. This is taking us right way back hundreds and hundreds of years in terms of the solar cycles, and this has been based on carbon dating, radiocarbon dating. We can go back to the Maunder minimum, for instance, just there. We can go to the Spora minimum, the Wolf minimum, medieval maximum, which is over here around the years 1100, 1200, when we had an increase in solar activity, and it was quite warm as well. There is a debate, of course, about whether solar activity is influencing global temperatures, and all you can say really about the medieval maximum is that it was a time when it was pretty warm in Europe. They was growing grapevines, for instance, up towards Scotland around this period. So you have to say that during this period here, which has got quite active sort of solar cycles going on, it is quite warm across most of Europe. But let's start at the at the medieval maximum around the year 1200, just here. That's when we've got a maximum in activity, and it's really from there that we go downwards gradually in towards the Maunder minimum. So our first plunge downwards occurs around here, the year 1300. We begin then to move down from the medieval maximum in towards the start of the Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age, it's not clear exactly when the Little Ice Age begins, but I think sometime through the 1300s is about when we start to turn things a little bit colder across Europe and North America. Then we get a bit of a tick up after that plunge down into the Wolf minimum. We get a bit of a tick back up briefly around the year 1400. We move back towards where he was in the medieval maximum. We're not quite there in terms of the solar activity, but we're close. We aren't far from it. But then from the year 1400 to the year 1500, we go down again. We really start to plunge down. We go down in towards the Spora minimum, which reaches its minimum of that particular sort of episode around the year 1500. And from the 1500s through to 1600s, we slowly try and plug our way back up. But of course, now we're much lower than we was in the medieval maximum. So even though solar activity is ticking up a little bit through the 1500s, is at a much lower rate than we have through the period around 1200, 1100, 1000. It's a much lower level of activity, although we are moving back upwards through that sort of century. And then of course we get to the 1600s, and this is when we plunge down into the classic and famous Maunder minimum. We go down there and reach our trough in terms of the Maunder minimum, in terms of the Little Ice Age, through the latter stages of the 1600s. So for instance, from the years 1676 to 1684, there are no recorded sunspots, or hardly no recorded sunspots, around 8 years at the end of the 1600s. The real depth of the Little Ice Age, the trough of the Maunder minimum, are coinciding from around 1650 to around the start of the 1700s. And then as we go from the 1700s into the 1800s, we get a bit of a tick up in activity once again. We move back out of that sort of trough that we're in through the Maunder minimum. It takes a long time to do it, but we start to pick ourselves back up a little bit, going through there, and we get back to where we was more or less over here in the first sort of plunge down that we had in the Wolf minimum. And the winters are still severe through this period, through the 1700s. We're still getting severe winters, although the worst of the winters are in that period around this trough here with the Maunder minimum, from the late 1600s through to the early 1700s. Now the Dalton minimum is just here at the start of the 1800s. We get another move downwards, and that just there is in fact the Dalton minimum. Solar cycles 5, solar cycles 6 are occurring during this phase. What you have to keep in mind is that we hadn't really recovered from the Maunder minimum, so we're getting very severe months through the course of the Dalton minimum, through those solar cycles 5, solar cycle 6. We're not really seeing those severe sort of temperatures yet in solar cycle 24. We have had some colder winters, definitely, but we haven't plunged to the sort of depth of cold yet. It may happen, but we haven't done it yet. But we had through solar cycles 5, solar cycles 6 at the start of the 1800s. The reason for that, it's two reasons. They may be running together. One may be more important than the other. We've got climate change going on, warming the planet through carbon. That's one theory. The other theory, of course, is that in the Dalton minimum, we hadn't recovered from the severe cold that occurred during the depths of the Little Ice Age, which occurs with the Maunder minimum. So in the Dalton minimum, we've still not come out of the Little Ice Age, although we're showing signs of gradually trying to pull ourselves down of it. We haven't come out of it. So the potential is there, because we've not recovered from the Maunder minimum, really, for things to get very, very cold again through the Dalton minimum. I mean, of course, through the 1800s, well, we just sort of flatline actually through the 1800s. It's quite interesting. We don't get that push up that we have between the other minimums. We just sort of flatline through the 1800s on this red line here, get to the 1900s, 20th century, and of course the solar activity shoots up, absolutely pushes up through the course of the 20th century, the 1900s. What's happening now is that the prediction is that we may move backwards again to somewhere around here if solar cycles 24 and 25 continue to run closely to solar cycles 5 and solar cycle 6, we'll be somewhere to around here where we was in terms of the Dalton minimum. But notice we're getting nowhere down to where we was in the Maunder minimum. And of course, as I said, with the Dalton minimum, we haven't come out of the Maunder minimum, really. We haven't recovered from the Maunder minimum, whereas this situation is different because we're moving down rather than we're moving down from a very high base, high starting point, as opposed to being very close to a real deep trough in terms of the Maunder minimum. So you can't probably expect the sort of depth and severity of cold I would assume through these two solar cycles, 24 and 25, as we had through the Dalton minimum. That's what I'm trying to get across. Maybe not that well, but the Dalton minimum, we haven't recovered from a little ice age, whereas this time we're starting from the modern maximum, as it's called on this particular graph. What may happen through the course of this century is that, well, my guess, and I'm not really basing this on anything other than my sort of feeling when you look at these, it's very interesting that we're running at around a century up and down. So again, 1300s with there, 1400s with there, 1500s with there, 1600s with there, 1700 there, 1800s there, and then 1900s there. My guess is what's going to happen is that this will be a declining sort of century, so we'll move down probably somewhere around there with the next couple of solar cycles, move back to where we was in the Dalton minimum. Then we may get a push up through the middle years of the middle decades of this century. I would anticipate we may go up. Let's get rid of that and start again. We're going to go down there, I think, in the next couple of solar cycles. Then I think through the middle part of the century we may move upwards a little bit, probably not getting back to where it was in the modern maximum. I think we'll probably move back upwards, and then in the second half of the century, or the latter part of the century, we may well push things down even further. That would be my guess of what will happen in this century. So around 2030, 2050, we may get this increase upwards. From 2060 through towards the end of the century, we may move downwards again, probably not getting back to where we was in the Maunder minimum, but probably somewhere between the Maunder and the Dalton, maybe somewhere around there. Of course, a lot of us won't be alive to verify that, so I probably won't be around. Certainly by the time we get through to say 2070, 2080, 2090, I'm not going to be around to verify this prediction, but that would be my guess for where things probably go through the course of this century. Let's finish up with Hadley, having looked at how the century temperature was looking during the Dalton minimum, and here we are. This period just here, this is every century. This is the century temperature for every year going back into 1700s. Dalton minimum is these years just here, basically at a time when solar activity is going downwards. That is solar cycles 5 and 6, and yeah, we're going downwards with solar activity during that period. But as I say, we're starting from the Maunder minimum, so we haven't come out of little ice age, we haven't come out of the depths of cold that we had during the Maunder, so this is a very cold period during the Dalton minimum. Now this period just here, right at the end of the graph, is taking us down possibly into another very similar situation to the Dalton minimum in terms of solar cycles 24 and solar cycles 25. And it'll be interesting to see how far downwards we go with these temperatures. What we have to bear in mind, of course, is that we've got climate change, we've got global warming, gradually warming the planet, so you're going to have forces fighting against one another. Solar activity on one hand, carbon on the other hand. But I think that the cooling that we've had, and it is very evident on this, although we're having a very warm year in 2014, the cooling that we've had, which can be seen through this red line just here, is I think is coinciding quite nicely with that decline in solar activity. So if this does go on through the rest of solar cycle 24, and if we have another very weak solar cycle 25, my guess is that this red line will dip further and further downwards. But I wouldn't anticipate we'll get this sort of very cold period that we have through the Dalton, because, as I said, I've said it several times through this video, the Dalton minimum is a period that hasn't recovered from the Maunder minimum, it hasn't recovered from the little ice age, whereas this time we're starting from a very active period of solar activity, and we're starting from a very active, a very warm period, a very active period in terms of the temperature. So I would anticipate we'll have more very cold winters. I certainly am expecting that over the next few years. I don't think we'll get the sort of depth and severity of cold that we had in the Dalton, and that's my guess. And then, of course, if my ideas are right for the rest of the century, we'll tick up with the solar activity for 2 or 3 decades through the middle part of the century, and then move downwards again. We may go lower in the second half of the century than we are right now. We may sort of go between Dalton and Maunder territory. That would be very interesting, because when you're talking about very weak solar activity, you may get periods, if that was to happen, where you go for a year or more without seeing a sunspot. Would be very interesting to see what happens then, because of course we've got carbon increasing even more, so we've got real fight going on then between solar and carbon to see which has the deciding factor. Lots of speculation. I hope you found the video interesting. I hope I haven't gone on too long. I hope you've been able to follow it. I don't always explain these things all that well, because I'm not an expert on solar activity. I just enjoy looking up the data and sort of giving you the information as best I can. But very quick, going back to what's happening with solar cycle 24 anyway, where we started at the video. I think we've passed the second peak of the cycle. We've passed solar maximum. We should very slowly and gradually move down into solar minimum. Solar minimum will occur around 2019, 2020, something like that, and then it'll be very interesting to see what happens with solar cycle 25, whether we continue to run closely as we have been to solar cycles 5, where the solar cycles 25 runs closely to solar cycle 6. That's it for now. Hope that video interesting. We will be doing the final and official Gauss Weatherfeeds autumn forecast next week, so come back for that next Sunday. It'll be very interesting. After that, we'll be moving sort of a winter period. As we move into the autumn through September, we'll start doing some winter updates, see how things are progressing. So it's all going to start happening at Gauss Weatherfeeds very soon. Hope that video interesting. That's it for now, and thanks for watching.